Hello, I'm Jacob Staggs. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you haven't been here before. Today I'm going to be briefly reviewing and rating all of Jackie Chan's 1970s films. I've been a mega Jackie Chan fan since I was 7 years old, but despite that fact, I'm also a critic, and several Jackie's films I don't think live up to their potential, because I know what Jackie's capable of, and so I know they could be better, and some of Jackie's films I just think are amazing. Some I think are good. Some I think are just plain bad. It just depends. But there's always something good in them. Even the really bad ones, there's something about them in some point that I like. And so, even the worst Chan film will have something redeeming about it. And so I thought it'd be fun for me to do this where I rank all of Jackie's films, rate and review all of Jackie's films per decade. Because I feel I have quite a different opinion from a lot of Jackie Chan fans. Because, see, until the age of 13, I didn't have much access to the internet. And so when I started watching these films when I was 7 onward, I wasn't basing any of my opinions whatsoever on what people were saying online. I was only basing my opinions directly on what I thought. And so when I'd see these films, some of these films, I'd be like, that's a great movie, And I think, it's so good. And then later I'd look online and I'd go, I bet people really like this. People say, oh, it's terrible, it's awful. And I'd see ones that I was like, not very good. People online would be like, oh, it's great, one of the best. And so I know a lot of times, not everybody, but I know a lot of times people base their opinions on what they read online and kind of copy that opinion. I know that because people sometimes word it almost directly word for word as how someone else put it. But me, I had the privilege, I guess you might call it, of never seeing other people's opinions before making my own on these films, back between the ages of 7 and 12 when I saw so many of them. And so, whether I thought they were good or bad, it was all completely what I thought. And so, I like to share my opinions on these because, like I said, even later when I had the internet, I would read the opinions, the reviews for fun. But I would still form my own opinion because I never got into the idea that I should base my ideas on other people's reviews. And it's never been that way for me. So, I like to share my opinions because I said some are very different from the normal Jackie Chan fan. So let's begin. And some rules here, right before we start. What qualifies as a Jackie Chan movie in the 70s? It has to be from the 70s. And Jackie Chan has to be in it at least 2 minutes, otherwise I'm not covering it. So, with that in mind, and there are 2 films here that kind of fall in the category of this criteria and kind of don't fall into this criteria. I'll bring those up when we come to them. One I am counting in this review. One I am not. We'll get to those when we get to them. And Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. Some people say it wasn't released until 1980 because it was shelved. Some people say it was actually released in 1978. I'm going by 1978. That's what I think. That's what I'm going with. Okay. So, let's begin. The first one is 1973's Eagle Shadow Fist. Eagle Shadow Fist is a great movie. Jackie has a supporting role in it, but it doesn't matter because the movie is just fantastic. The characters are well developed. The action is great. The martial arts sequences. The story is captivating. And the movie has a real emotional core to it. Because, see, a lot of these old Chinese films about Japanese opposition is usually about, oh, you want me to change the name of my school? Oh, you want me to close down my school? And I know it's about honor, but it seems like, oh, they're being murdered just because they didn't want to change the name of their school. Just change the name but whisper to people that come in, oh, it's not that name, you know. But instead they're all being slaughtered, and I just can't really go with it. But in Eagle Shadowfist, it's obvious why they're fighting. I mean, the Japanese are taking their money, taking their possessions, beating them, murdering them. The Japanese are raping people. I can really see why they're fighting. And also, of course, Jackie's character can fight in this movie, and the main hero, he can fight in the movie, and the bad guys can fight. But most of the other characters, the good guys, they have no fighting abilities. And so you really feel bad for them when they're just like being beaten by the Japanese and they can't defend themselves. And they just get murdered or whatever. And, you know, in a way it's tragic. You know, because what are they going to do about it? And also, the gore used in this film, it makes perfect sense. The blood, the gore, why it exists within this narrative, because it's supposed to show you an intensity to what's going on, the danger of it. It feels very unsafe. And it really comes through. People just bleeding all over the ground and people being sliced with swords and just bleeding out. It just shows a ferocity, how villainous these people really are, these Japanese characters. And you really feel it, you know? And so, just the impact, the emotional punch this film delivers just makes it a great film, you know? I highly recommend this one, despite the fact Jackie just has a supporting part. This movie is an easy 10 out of 10. Highly recommend it. And also, this is directed by Mu Chu. Mu Chu is my favorite director for directing films with Jackie Chan in the 1970s. He just does a exquisite job each time. And he has a few more films that I'll be discussing here from the 70s, and they're just excellent. And so we'll get to those in a little bit, including the one coming up next, which is The Young Tiger, also from 1973, aka Policewoman. And in this, Jackie plays one of his only bad guy roles. He's one of the villains. He's basically second in command. And again, Mu Chu directs a great film. This film is about crime. This film is about how violent and sexual media can turn young kids, teenagers, and stuff. It can affect them in a negative way that makes them more prone to committing crime and all kinds of like deviant behaviors. And also, the movie's about what should a person do, because you kind of have, you feel like you have an obligation to help people and to do the right thing, but it also gets you hurt, in trouble, you know, causes you great distress. And so it's like, how far should you go? How much should you help? Right and wrong. It's just, it brings up question. But this movie really has a story to tell. Even the one girl in the movie, she's addicted to drugs, and there's even a part where she's on the bed, she's clasping at the sheets, she's going through withdrawals, and she's just in this pitiful state. And you know, the policewoman wants to help her, but what's she going to do about it, you know? and she can only get help if she really wants it, you know. But she has this girl help her to alert the police to what's going on in the movie, and it brings up a lot of interesting questions. And on top of that, you have all the great fight sequences in the movie and some car scenes, and at the end you have Jackie doing a one-on-one fight scene with actor Charlie Chin. Very good scene, top notch. And it's very interesting to see Jackie playing a bad guy, you know, beating people up, taking their money, you know, acting generally unpleasant, because Jackie's not known for that. And it's a nice early role for him, where he isn't tied down to playing his usual slapstick comedic type roles. And this movie also has a great soundtrack. The music's probably stolen, but I don't know what from, because most 70s Chinese martial arts films, the music is stolen, but they stole the best stuff they could. And I really enjoy the music. Other stuff in the movie, it's really great. They have great 70s fashions they're wearing. Another thing I really liked in this movie is, besides the directing and writing by Mu Chu, is also the editing. The editing on the movie is really good, really quick in spots, you know, a little rough but organic, and it really feels like every frame they're trying to invest you more and more in what's happening. I really appreciate that. So Young Tiger is highly recommended, but I don't give it a 10 out of 10 like Eagle Shadow Fist. I give it a 9.5 out of 10, because Young Tiger, there are some spots where the stuff is a little repetitive about what's happening, and for that reason I take off half a star, but it's still very highly recommended. And up next, we have a film that this is Jackie's first starring role that he made in 1971, but it wasn't released until this year, 1973, and it's called Cub Tiger from Kwantung. This is Jackie's first starring role, and Jackie does a decent job in the film. Fights are pretty decent, but these will later be fixed up really nice for another film, for Master with Cracked Fingers in 1978. We'll get to that later. But this movie, the main problems here that is not the acting. The cast does a really good job with their performances. The main problems here is the script and the amount of fighting, because like a couple other movies from the 70s, this movie has so much fighting in it that it takes away any chance for a plot to develop. Like, you think a story's going to come along and grab you, and then you get another fight scene, you know, completely taking away any feeling you might be able to get. And also the story itself, the little that there is very poorly done, but it's not the cast's fault. And also, the movie has a severe lack of music. This is another thing that will be improved upon with Master with Cracked Fingers in 1978. Don't worry, we'll get there after a while. And so this movie is not very good at all, but it's interesting to see Jackie in his first starring role, and the cast all does well. But due to the over-frequent, too much fight scenes and the poor script, I have to give this movie just a 4 out of 10. Okay, so next up, we have No End of Surprises. This is from 1975, This is a movie that consists of 3 stories. The first one is about the history of Mahjong. The second one is entitled The Woman Killer, and this one has Jackie Chan in it in a big role. And the third one is about the filming of a movie within a movie, a swordsman movie, and all the things that go wrong on the set. Kind of a mockumentary of sorts. And the movie is quite good. This is again directed by Mu Chu, just as Eagle Shadow Fist and Young Tiger are. Mu Chu does an excellent job directing again. The stories are great. And Jackie's story actually involves a scene where he stabs 2 women with a knife and frames one of them. And it's a very good story. I highly recommend this. But that being said, it's not quite as good as the previous 2 Mu Chu films. So I give this one an 8 out of 10. Still very good, and I definitely recommend you check it out. But it's very rare and hard to find. So that might be an obstacle. Okay, but there is clips of it on YouTube. And next up, we have All in the Family. This is from 1975. And contrary to popular belief, Jackie even said this himself, said it was pornographic. It is not. It is just a comedy film. And Jackie does have a brief sex scene in it, but it's not explicit at all. It's just a comedy movie. And again, this is directed by Mu Chu. Mu Chu does a great job. Jackie has good scenes in the movie, and the comedy is all right. It's not quite as good as the previous 3 Mu Chu films, but it's still very good. I would give this movie a 7 out of 10. I definitely recommend you see this one too. Mu Chu is just a master of his craft. And next up, we have Hand of Death from 1975. Just like No End of Surprises and All in the Family are 1975. Hand of Death is Jackie's last big role from 75, and it is one of the first, maybe the first movie directed by John Woo. And not much to say about this one. It's just a typical martial arts film with fighting, and Jackie's in it. It's nothing special whatsoever. It's not very good. I'd probably give this a 4 out of 10. Nothing special to it. And after this movie, Jackie would go to Australia for about half a year, and he would only come back when he was offered a movie contract from director Lo Wei. And that would begin with the next movie, New Fist of Fury. New Fist of Fury is not a very good movie. This movie was released in 1976. It's weird because in most of Jackie's early movies, Jackie is one of the weaker as far as acting goes. One of the weaker ones as far as acting goes in these early films. But it's weird because in the case of New Fist of Fury, Jackie is one of the stronger performers, which isn't saying that Jackie is doing a great job with his performance, but it's just saying that the other ones are really bad in comparison and not really bringing their all to the screen or something. I don't know what the deal is. But in New Fist of Fury, there's not too much to talk about. I mean, it's Jackie's first film with Lo Wei, and Jackie said this role was completely against type for him, but I'd say not really, because Jackie gives one of his more charismatic performances concerning his 70s films here, and he comes across quite likable. Even most of the fight scenes in this movie aren't very good, but Jackie's training sequences are very good, and Jackie's finale fights against Okamura's daughter and Okamura are quite good, if not the best. But really, there's not too much to say about this. But it can be watched. It's decent, but nothing to brag about. I give this a 5 out of 10. The next up, Jackie made for the Loewe Company, Shaolin Wooden Men. This is also 1976. Shaolin Wooden Men is very well liked by a lot of Jackie Chan fans. But to me personally, I didn't think there was really much going for it. I mean, it just kind of felt like a lot of other martial arts movies. I mean, I did like the scene where Jackie fought the wooden men of the title, but I don't know, the movie didn't really do much for me. I did like that Jackie's character was mute, so he did the most of the movie pantomiming and stuff like that. But other than that, there wasn't really too much worthwhile about it. I know a lot of people would be like, oh, this is an 8 out of 10, this is a 9 out of 10, whatever. But for me personally, it's nothing special. I wouldn't give it a very good score. I'd probably give it the lowest of any of them so far. I'd probably give it a 3 out of 10, to be honest. Next up is The Killer Meteors from 1977. The Killer Meteors has Jackie in a supporting role as the villain, and it stars Jimmy Wang Yu. This film is very decent from a plot standpoint. The problem is, it's one of those movies that feels that it has to fill it with dialogue that has no point to the story, just to kind of pad it out and make it feel more grandiose. You know, a lot of dialogue doesn't really serve a purpose. The cast all does a good job, although I have to admit Jackie might be the weak link in this cast as far as acting performance. But some things going forward is the restraint used during the fight scenes, where all the hits feel like they have real purpose, and also the costumes in the movie are really good. And like I said, the acting performances are pretty good too. But at the same time, it's not the most interesting of films, but it does offer something special from time to time. I'd probably still just have to give this movie a 6 out of 10. Up next, also from 77, is To Kill with Intrigue. This returns Jackie to being the main character, having the starring role. This is a wuxia drama period piece, and it's like it has decent story to it, but it's not really that interesting of a story. Now, once again, while Jackie does all right with his acting performance, the rest of the cast just blows him away because they do such a good job with their performances. I mean, the script might not be very good, the direction might not be that good, but the cast is on fire. You know, they really bring it to the screen. Only performer might be weaker than Jackie is the actress playing Chin Chin. She didn't do very good, but everyone else was just like a pro, you know. And despite the fact Jackie didn't get the best performance and the story wasn't really that good, the final fight in the movie is one of my 3 favorite Jackie Chan movie fight scenes of all time. It's just perfectly choreographed. I could watch it again and again. And it's even one of those ones that's like 7 minutes. I usually am not as big a fan of those, but it was so perfectly done. Those longer fights. But it was so perfectly done, I didn't care. It was just a masterpiece. Okay, so that movie, despite of all its flaws, despite the fact the story is not the best, all this, it does have a brutality to it that it makes it stand out. So I think I would give this actually a 6, probably 6, maybe a 7 out of 10. And the next up, we got the 2 films Like I said, they kind of fall into the criteria of what I talked about at the beginning of the video. They kind of don't. The first one is 36 Crazy Fists, where Jackie's not actually in the movie, but he's in the making of at the very beginning, which is connected to the movie, like as made as part of the movie as a whole, but isn't the movie. I'm going to count this one. I really like this. I mean, I don't like the movie too much, but Jackie's part at the beginning, the making of behind the scenes, it just has this really like hypnotic music to the making of, and Jackie's doing all these cool moves and stuff. I just thought was great. This great background behind them. One collar is just great stuff, showing all the moves, practicing it, preparing it for the screen. It was just a joy to watch. You can see Jackie smoking a cigarette, in the behind the scenes. It's crazy, I mean, I don't approve of smoking whatsoever, but it's just an anomaly to see that. And I count that one, but the next one I don't. It's also from 1977. It's called Face Behind the Mask. And this is rumored to have Jackie, because Jackie was under contract, so he couldn't be in the movie. But they haven't played a character that wears a mask, and the character has a little bit of scenes in the movie, and they say that it's Jackie behind the mask, but there's no proof either way as if this is true or not. So I'm not counting that, but he might very well be in it. Next up but anyway, the 36 Crazy Fist one, I didn't care much for that film, but I liked the making of. But the movie still isn't too bad. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. Okay. Next up, we have Staying Crouched of Shaolin. And this has some really good fight scenes in it, particularly the one at the end where Jackie's fighting 3 guys with spears. That's an excellent scene. The problem with this movie is the script and plot are terrible, almost non-existent. You can't really care about what's going on when the characters aren't developed at all, and they're just kind of stock characters. So while some of the fights are really good, that's the only thing you can say about it besides that. And the costumes are really good. The fights are really good, but everything else is just, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to like besides those 2 elements. And so it pains me to say it because there are some good fight scenes. I just have to give it a 3 out of 10 because they made no effort to make this a movie. They just made it costumes and fights. And it depends what you're looking for, but to me, I've always been a thing, our movie has to be a movie. It doesn't matter how great the fights are if you don't have a good movie. That means the movie's bad regardless. It could have good fights, but it's not a good movie with nothing going for it besides fight scenes. Next up is Jackie's first comedy, Half a Loaf of Kung Fu. This is a weird movie. I mean, there's some good comedy bits in it. Jackie's clearly enjoying this newfound freedom to make this film. And there's some decent sequences and characters. But at the same time, the story never really gels. I don't get a sense of what's happening really matters too much. And the end fight is so long that it's infuriating. It should be a lot shorter, and it just takes up too much time. There are a lot of creative action scenes. There's a lot of creative moves. But it bogs down the movie too much. Because at first, this movie is really good at just focusing on Jackie as a character and building him up some so we understand him, his situation, what he's like, and what he's going to do. But eventually it just devolves into mostly punches and kicks, and we kind of lose the essence of what the movie's all about. So while there's some good stuff in there, I don't know how highly I'd recommend it. It's very strange. The choice of like weird music, weird sounds, weird scenarios, but it's definitely worth seeing. I'd probably give this a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have Hong Kong's first 3D movie, Magnificent Bodyguards, starring Jackie, James Tin, and Bruce Leung. And this is Jackie's only time working with that Bruce Lee impersonator. And this movie is interesting, but the plot is not that well developed, but there was an interesting twist near the end that I did not see coming. I really enjoyed that. And there are three main things going for this movie. One is the fight scenes. The fight scenes are very well done, very well choreographed, very entertaining. And then the second thing is the great costumes that the characters wear. Very nice costumes. And the third thing is the performance of Yun Shai Kwan as the main villain. He does a fantastic job. One other thing to note about this movie is its use of Star Wars music, stolen from the Star Wars movies, John Williams score. It was very funny to hear that in this Chopsaki martial arts film. And so that alone is also worth seeing Magnificent Bodyguards for, because that's very entertaining. Next up, so I'd give Magnificent Bodyguards a 7 out of 10, I guess. There's enough going for it, but the plot was basically rushed and it just didn't work. Okay, so next up would be Spiritual Kung Fu. This is Jackie's second comedy. Spiritual Kung Fu was actually written and directed by Lo Wei, where he was going to try to show Jackie how to make a comedy. And he does succeed at first, because the first half hour of the movie is quite good and it has lots of comedy scenes, very limited amount of martial arts action. But the problem with a lot of these 70s ones, which I know a lot of Jackie Chan fans like when they have too much martial arts in the films, and like even if the martial arts isn't that good, it's like, well, the more the merrier. But to me, after setting up this movie so well with Jackie's character and charisma and other characters, after eventually it divulges into mostly just fight scenes, and I could care less, because I mean the fights were done all right, but they weren't nothing special, and they just seemed to take away from the fun experience I was having watching this film. So I think that for the fun comedy of the first half hour, which really worked well, really was great, I had to give this higher than I would because the fight scenes really took it down a lot, but I think I can still give it a 5 out of 10. Next up is Jackie's first breakthrough hit movie, Snake and the Eagle Shadow. I know fans love this movie, but to me, well, I did like Jackie's character in it, and I did like some of the training sequences. There was way too many fights in it again, because I don't get it. You know, people say, oh, they're a fan of the movies and they like the movie, but sometimes it seems like, well, you're liking the movie or just these fight scenes, because it feels like they're really out of place when there's so many and they're just stuffing the plot like the movie like that with these fight scenes, not letting the movie breathe, and just to basically fill up time. I didn't feel like a lot of these scenes were earned. They just were done for the sake of it. And so while a lot of people really like Snake and Little Shadow, and I can see to points why they do, I really can only give it a 5 out of 10, but it was a nice try, but they just needed to really cut down on the fights. I mean, there were so many and so frequent. I really couldn't get nothing out of the characters. The characterizations are basically non-existent. The writing is basically non-existent. And so none of it gelled, you know. The next up is Drunken Master. So, well, first, Snake and the Eagle Shadow, I'd probably give that a 5 out of 10, like I said. But next up is Drunken Master. Drunken Master is a fan favorite. It's super acclaimed. Considered one of the greatest martial arts films of all time. I know all this. It's interesting to have Jackie play a character that's like this jerk, you know. But at the same time, it's like the same problem I had with Snake and the Eagle Shadow. There's so many fights, and they're all right, but they just take away from the potential for any plot or story or characterizations to develop beyond a couple, and it just doesn't work for me overall. I know what they're going for, but they needed to let the movie breathe. So Drunken Master, well, it does have its good points. Ultimately didn't work, so I'm afraid I'm going to also have to award it a 5 out of 10. That brings us back to director Mu Chu for his last film that he directed with Jackie Chan. And once again, he does not disappoint. It is called Master with Cracked Fingers, and it is a redone version of Cub Tiger from Kwantung, where they took some footage from that original movie, put new footage with it, new music, and made a new movie out of it. And this new movie is a huge improvement over the original. He does so good at editing the new footage and the old footage together to really make something great. And the music that was stolen, like all these old Chinese movies do, stolen to make up the soundtrack. It's just great stuff. It really adds impact and bite to the sequences. And this is one of those movies that has a lot of action sequences, a lot of fights. But Mu Chu wisely never has them go on longer than they need to, and uses them just to take the story along while showcasing some really nice moves. I really appreciate what he did, because I compared it to Cub Tiger from Kwantung, both versions of this movie. And I thought it interesting how he had such a great eye and such a great way of looking at this footage and deciding what to keep, because Mu Chu took out any moment from Cub Tiger from Kwantung that was corny or silly or didn't fit with the type of movie that he was making. Like, it didn't fit with being a movie that could be more international, get a wider audience across the globe. He took out every moment that didn't work or seemed hokey. And so I really appreciate that. He really kept everything that was worthwhile in his final product. And I applaud him for that. This is another one of those great Mu Chu films that he directed that Jackie's in, but this time it was just courtesy of old footage. And it was just great. It was a big improvement. And I give that movie a 9 out of 10. He just did an excellent job, especially on the blocking of the new footage for the final fight scenes where it's someone pretending to be Jackie's part and they avoid showing his face on camera. I mean, they just did wonderful at that. And then you have an American production like Game of Death, where they were unable to block and not show the face and do a good job. But here, this low budget, redoing of a 1973 movie, they just did it seamlessly. They did it exquisitely. So my highest praise is to Mu Chu. He really knows how to take Jackie and put him in good films. So I was very pleased. 9 out of 10. And then next up, we have Dragon Fist from 1979. I know a lot of Hong Kong cinema movie fans sing the praises of Dragon Fist, but I think this is actually probably the worst offender for having so much martial arts in it that no story can develop, no characters can develop, nothing can develop other than fight scenes. Because, the movie does have some good fight scenes, and actually some mediocre fight scenes as well. And it does have good costumes, but besides costumes and fight scenes, what does this have? It has absolutely nothing, because nothing can develop for the constant kicking, punching, flipping, nothing can happen in this. Every second that something starts to happen, they say, nope, we're going to have a fight. And that really ticks me off. And so, I hate saying it, but I have to give this movie a 0 out of 10. It just does not work on so many levels. Now we have one more film from the 1970s to review, and that is The Fearless Hyena. This is Jackie Chan's directorial debut. In a lot of ways, this movie is similar to Snake and Little Shadow and Drunken Master. This movie, but it doesn't do quite as bad about that as far as developing a story. because this movie does have a little bit of a story, and it does have some emotional scenes, and you do feel for Jackie at points in the movie. But it could have been so much more if they cut down, because there's a lot of very super comedic goofball fight scenes in this, and there's a lot of other fight scenes in this too. But there's so many fights that they kind of smother out a lot of the story, a lot of the characters, a lot of everything. This is a big gripe, as you've seen for me through these 70s films, where they put everything off to the side and just say fight. But there are scenes that really work, and there is a really good fight with Jackie against some guys with spears. And there's some really good training sequences, but at the same time, everything else is stopped by the action. Nothing can develop. And so, even though this is a decent effort to start off his directorial filmography, I think I still have to get a 5 out of 10, because it suffers from the same problems as Snake in the Shadow and Drunken Master, about not let anything come of anything other than fights. And that is my look and ranking for all of Jackie's 1970s rating for all of Jackie's 70s films. Next time I'll be doing Jackie's films of the 80s. I hope you'll tune in. I'm going to be reviewing every film that Jackie was in the 80s that he's in for at least 2 minutes. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this reviewing and rating, and I think you can definitely see how my opinion differs from a lot of others. Because like I said, I never had my opinions made or really influenced by other opinions. So I hope you enjoyed this video.